Let's get talking. President Donald Trump on Monday agreed to a 30-day pause on his tariff threats against Mexico and Canada as America's two largest trading partners took steps to appease his concerns about border security and drug trafficking. The pauses provide a cool-down period after a tumultuous few days that put North America on the cusp of a trade war that risked crushing economic growth, causing prices to soar and ending two of the United States' most critical partnerships. Now, the pause followed a similar move with Mexico that allows for a period of negotiations over drug smuggling and illegal immigration. The 10% tariff that Trump ordered on China is set to go into effect on February 10th, though Trump plans to talk with Chinese President Xi Jinping in the next few days. Now, while the trade war feared by investors, companies, and political leaders now seem less likely to erupt, that doesn't mean the drama over Trump's tariff threats has ended. Canada and Mexico bought some additional time, but Trump could easily renew his tariff and already plans to announce taxes on imports from the European Union. Let's bring in Dr. Biodun Adedipe. He is the chief consultant, Adedipe Associates Limited. He will speak to us around this and, of course, some other economic issues. Thank you so much. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you very much, Tolu. I'm happy to be with you today, and I thank you for having me.
Doc, I think it's good we start this conversation this way. Were you expecting this? It was a campaign promise. He talked about it, that this tariff thing will come up, and we've seen it come. And almost, it's already a global trade war, which obviously will impact Africa. But first, what is your take with regards to all that has been happening? Just a few weeks in office, and Trump is shaking the whole world.
Well, thank you very much for that. Now, first is that, yes, all these things, Trump mentioned them, even on to specific rates for different geographies when he was campaigning. Now he's in office and he has the power as the POTUS, as it's referred to. Now, what it means then is that, in my own view, I don't expect any different action from him that is different than what he said while he was campaigning. And he has kept to that so far, except that we have not seen the rush and let me say, the body language when he was campaigning and saying this. We could practically sense it then that he was angry about the way things are. So in context of MAGA, and that is Make America Great Again, that was the key, issue in his campaign. What this would mean is that, like he said then, I'm going to do 60% on China, that's up to 60% on China. And then secondly, that I will give particular attention to Mexico and Canada. But so every country around the world, he said, in the range of 10% to 20%, which means it also not only affects the whole of Africa, but Nigeria as well. So now what they have done thus far, for me, is not unexpected. It's just following the pattern of what he said. But also interestingly, he has now seen some pushback. So which means that if when he was campaigning, he looked at only one side, US slamming tariffs on everybody around the world, the way he said it there. Now he has seen that there will be some pushback, from some countries. We can now later talk about the implications of this, for global trade, for macroeconomic, indices, and more importantly, for the growth of individual economies of those countries impacted, and then the global economy this year and going forward.
Do you think that this is an opportunity to also make Africa great again? Or should I say, make Nigeria great again? Some say there is an opportunity in this.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Now, from my own perspective, it brings to bear now the reality of what I've been privileged to be involved in discussing Nigeria since 1987, when we began to talk about the structure of tariffs. This is all about tariffs, okay? What you levy on imports and what goes on exports. Now, the position of Trump is that anything coming to the US, we are going to levy these tariffs and make them more expensive, and therefore discourage our people from buying them. And if we do, they will look inwards And if they look inwards, then we can produce more, employ more of our children, that is more of job creation, and then hopefully grow our economy. But it didn't look at the flip side, which is the context that we now put Nigeria. Now, if we look at Nigeria and what we export to the US, and in fact, as of today, what we US on our list of top 10, export destination is not high up on the table. So which means what we do with US today as external trade is not as significant as it was so many years ago. So but what does this mean? Even if these tariffs are slammed on the little that we export, that means the US market is closing to us. Two important things there. One is we need to strengthen our relationships in the direction of trade of Nigeria, which you have seen over the years. And I'm happy that we just recently revived, the dollar renminbi swap, that is with the Chinese currency. It's a good development. But we should begin now to look at our external policies aligning with the direction of our trade and the structure of our trade. That's number one. Number two, also, if Trump can go the way of MAGA, like you rightly said, make Africa great again, coming home, make Nigeria great again, that means we also must look inwards. How do we strengthen domestic manufacturing? How do we now align what we produce with what we consume? How do we ensure that in the process of deepening manufacturing in Nigeria, we are able to create more jobs, and then in the process also grow our economy, let me say intentionally. That's intentional growth of the economy, which means we focus on the fundamentals of any economy, which is agriculture, that secures food security, and then manufacturing that now is more focused on value added. So if we now look in that direction, this might actually be an opportunity to refocus our economy and then get us to adopt those initiatives that will get us on the right path to sustainable, sustained, and inclusive growth.
Moving forward, implication of this on trade, global logistics, and supply chain.
Yeah.
Doc, how does that come to you?
Well, clearly, if Trump makes good his, let me call it threat now, with respect to tariffs on everybody, that means, number one, imports into the US become more expensive, and that means it will trigger inflationary pressures in the US. That also means the response of the Federal Reserve, that's their own central bank, will be in the direction of raising monetary policy rate rather than reducing it. And if that happens, that means dollar assets will also attract a higher rate in terms of return on those investments. So in which case, different other financial markets around the world will come under pressure in terms of investors now looking at dollar assets more attractive than they used to be. Just the reverse of what we experienced also in Nigeria in the last 2 years, where Naira assets became more attractive, and we saw a massive inflow of fresh investments into the Nigerian financial space. And of course, you can see it in external reserves. Okay, so now if that happens, that means the dollar as a currency, a trading currency, will become stronger. A stronger dollar also will mean trouble for countries that are indebted in dollars, especially those countries like Nigeria and some other African countries that are still in external debt. Yeah. So that enhances their vulnerability. So in which case, it means everyone has to now take seriously that it's a time for reforms that are deep and sustained, so that the resilience of our economies can, of course, be strengthened, and they'll be able to countermand this particular trend. Of course, as you rightly said, it will affect global trade, which will likely dampen. Like we had the DG of WTO, that is our own Dr. Ngozi, Iweala, who said that if this is sustained, the likelihood is that global trade will dampen by over 7%. And of course, this will also impact the global GDP, that's the entire global GDP, by about $7.6 trillion. So if trade will dampen, global economy will dampen, of course, logistics as well. That is movement of goods and supply disruptions. All of this will imply negative effects. So what it means then is that, like I said, Nigeria must look inwards. Then African countries should now take seriously the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, so they begin to produce and do more trade with ourselves internally. $3 trillion estimated market under AFTA. This is the time for African countries to take that very seriously.
Indeed, Dr. Adedipe, I'm going to take it from there. A population of about 1.3 billion, I think, or over 1.2 billion. That's talking about Africa's population. And we've talked about the AFCFTA after the inauguration, the signing and all of that. And I still see that countries like Nigeria, for example, are we taking real advantage of this? At first, it was the issue of Nigeria not becoming a dumping ground. We went over that for some time, and we got through it, and we put pen to paper. When are we going to start to take advantage of this large market? What are the opportunities there for Nigeria, even at the moment, even if it's export services at this time?
Thank you very much. Now, the opportunities for Nigeria are very many. Now, under the agreement, we have done, to the best of my knowledge, maybe it's information that is not available, only one consignment, and that was the export from Toleram to Kenya. All right, that's the only transaction I'm aware that has been done under that arrangement. So we see clearly also, if you back out Nigeria's population, estimated at about 235 million people, back it out from 1.2, 1.3 billion of Africa. That means Nigeria is still looking at a population of almost 1 billion elsewhere in Africa. So, and like I've also advocated some time ago, that what we should do seriously is look at all these African countries, map the top 20 imports of those countries, and then look inwards here in Nigeria. Who are those who produce products that show up on the top 20 plate of every African country? So what will they require in terms of support in whichever way that will enable them produce for the African market? It must be done deliberately. And of course, we don't need to look far to see an example. There's an example close by in Ghana. What we see and hear the Ghanaian government, do is, I would say, is a good example. But now we can also go the same way. In which case, our government should not, our functionaries, top government functionaries, should not sit back in their office waiting for the private investors to come with them. Then we go after them. Okay, we know you have capacity to produce this, which is on the top 10, top 20 import table of so African country. Now, what will you require in order to produce at a competitive rate that can make you now supply them in that particular nation? That is the way we must approach it as business, not as a government initiative, but as business. So we go to those producers and empower them, strengthen them to be able to compete internationally. Because then, in competing in Africa, don't forget, you'll be competing with companies that operate at extra Africa, that is outside of Africa.
Yeah.
So it must be deliberate and intentional. That is the way to go in the situation we are. And we must be aggressive about it.
We talked about the currency, the greenback. We know that currency is powerful. We have GDP calculated in dollars. Loans are calculated in dollars. Of course, foreign reserves are also calculated in dollars. So in that aspect too, Doc, I would like you to, what are we supposed to look at? Some experts have argued that it's time to start to look at other sources of revenue now, and also, revenue generation. Maybe the yarn, maybe we start to sell gold, maybe we start to drill. And what do you think is the way out of this? How we start to shift gradually away from this dependence so very much on the greenback?
Thank you so very much. Now, I will make reference to two things. Sometime in 1997, what we know today as Debt Management Office was a department of the Central Bank of Nigeria. I was invited to a conversation with the head of that department then and some of his top, the management staff of the department. And the conversation we had then was looking at the euro as a currency to be introduced in another 2 years or so to that time. We now ask the question, should we begin to look at how we account and also document Nigeria's external debt? Should we begin to consider a possibility of the euro that was impending coming stronger than the US dollar and sustained as such? What will that mean for our external debt obligations? So we're thinking that is there a possibility of diversifying the portfolio instead of having the accounting strictly in the US dollars? Now have that split between the dollar and the euro anytime the euro came. That was 1997. Now, more recently, Nigeria applied and was given approval in the observer status at the BRICS. Okay? Now, what this means, we now call it BRICS Plus, by the way. Now, in BRICS Plus, and it's an opportunity for Nigeria, we should begin now to look within that relationship of countries. Okay? Some call it the southern alternative to the north. But the bottom line of it is this. Countries that are members of BRICS Plus do more of trade with one another, not in the US dollar as a currency. Rather, they trade with one another in their own currencies. In which case, the advantage the greenback has as a third currency in such transactions has been taken out of the way. So Nigeria should look at that seriously and consider what we sell to other countries within the BRICS Plus family, whether we can actually price them in their own currencies, and when they buy from us, they also buy in our currency. That way we begin to address the dollar obsession that we have in everything we do. Just like you said, in transactions, in documentation, even in terms of measuring our GDP, in accounting, even the regular price quoted in Naira. The first thing people do nowadays is to convert to dollars. And you saw some analysts, when the federal government announced, the president presented the budget for 2025 to the National Assembly, people converted 47.9 trillion Naira to dollars.
Yes.
And they said, well, that's the equivalent of $34.21 billion.
Yes.
So it has become, it is part of our psyche now to convert anything we see into dollars. Even when we borrow from China, which is in renminbi, the people will convert that to dollars. And that's the way we think. So it's an opportunity for us to also see how we move away from that dollar hegemony and reduce and redress this psyche of everybody thinking in dollar terms. So for me, it's a good opportunity, and we should play that very well within the BRICS Plus.
An interesting conversation, Doc. I know we're supposed to stay a bit with Nigeria, but this is the burning issue, and it's good that we're staying on it. Wrapping this up now, aluminiums, steels, and all of that, of course, they might get more expensive. So the heat on that, because looking at the analysis and breakdown, going forward, do you think there could be renegotiations, and what should we expect moving forward from Donald Trump, of course?
Okay, now certainly there will be, when it comes to Nigeria, let me say, and we get our own Islamic, it will be an opportunity for renegotiation, because the world we live in now, no nation is an island. We've known that for long. The reality today is that when President Trump looked at the matter, he saw only one side. He didn't look at the other side, that we live now in an interdependent world. So we need to be reminded about that, and the fact that there are things America needs from the rest of the world, much as the rest of the world needs some things from America. So there will always be room for negotiation for those who are aware. So that means you must be self-aware that there's opportunity for negotiation. But more importantly is to look inwards. What have we done with our steel subsector? I was part of the team that surveyed that in 1988. Very interesting things, intrigues that carries a whole lot about geopolitics, all right, in that particular instance. Now, the issue for us is, what do we now do with that sector? What can we do with the steel plant in Ajaokuta there? What has happened to Delta Steel? What is happening to the rolling mills? How about the machine tools? We must return to those plans and projects that we have. So in which case, going by the 3 Ps of public sector planning, where we start from policies that are well defined, coming down to programs that will drive the execution of the policies, and then projects specifically. So in which case, this is a time to look at aligning those 3 aspects of government's activities: the policies, the programs, and the project. How about aluminum smelting? Nigeria has been in that space in the early years after independence. But where are we today? So we must not end up renegotiating any tariffs that any country brings up in the situation we are in, but also look more inwards. How do we build capacity locally here for most of the things we import? Which, in fact, interestingly, is the direction that Trump is driving towards for America. So you have to also look at yourself and see how you can make Nigeria great again.
Interesting.
So, MNGA.
NAGA, yes, I agree with you. We need to make Nigeria great again. I think it's a good way to leave it. Interesting conversation always. Dr. Biodun Adedipe, Chief Consultant, Adedipe Associates Limited. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. We know you're a very busy person, but we appreciate this.
Always happy to be with you. Thank you very much to me.
All right, then. Enjoy the rest of your day. All right, now, still to